Yes, Madelyn.
What do you call it when a writer just seemingly has supernatural beings springing out here, there, everywhere to save the day at every turn in the plot?
I don't know. What do you call it?
Deus Ex Everything! Hello, and welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
Look, the joke I thought I was
Unless
going
you've
to tell...
got a Deus Ex Everything.
In which case it's not dangerous at all.
Not at all dangerous.
Now, the joke I was going to tell is going to be like, what do you get when you add up all of the things in the universe?
What's that?
Everything.
Oh. Who would have guessed it?
I thought the joke that I went with was at least a little bit more, showed a little bit more thought.
Maybe.
You know, whether or not that thought seems to have been a good thing. But who knows? Anyway, thanks for tuning in, folks. I'm your joke-challenged host, Madelyn.
I'm your other host, Emma.
See, I always give myself a descriptor, and I feel bad that you just always have to be the other host.
I'm sorry, I could think of a descriptor if I really wanted to, but usually it's just beyond my my brain capacity in that moment.
That's fair. That's very fair. I do find that my jokes tend to melt brains.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're so awesome.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's why.
So this week, as you might have picked up from the literal joke title, we're talking about the games Deus Ex and Everything.
Everything the game.
What?
Everything the game, not everything.
Sorry, that's to be clear, and we will make this joke probably another half a dozen times over the course of the episode. We are not talking about literally everything. We were talking about the 2017 game from David O'Reilly, Everything.
Yes.
So just to be totally clear, as you might have picked up from the running time of this podcast, we don't quite have enough minutes to discuss everything, but man, do we try.
We sure do try.
So, Emma, are you ready to jump into our old game?
Sure, let's do it. Let's jump in to Deus Ex.
So, Deus Ex is a 2000 action role-playing game. It's developed by Ion Storm, which I think is a dope name for a video game studio. So many of them are like Man in a Room studios these days, or like Picnic Park, or
I don't think Picnic Park is a real developer. I think you made that up.
Is Man in a Room a real developer? I made that up too.
I don't know.
Or
Man in a Room sounds like it could be a developer. Picnic Park does not.
Nervous Antelope Studios.
That does sound like that one does. Yeah. Like descriptor animal is very hot hip right now.
So, Ion Storm, I feel like, is like, yeah, like back when video games were for men. You know? Like, Ion Storm! Anyway, I respect them going full on, just like, rock and roll title, right?
Yeah.
And it's a pretty influential game, as games go. I feel like we've been hitting a lot of the Wikipedia greatest video games of all time list games in the past couple episodes, which is truly the definitive ranking of the greatest video games of all time.
It is.
But Deus Ex, if you're not familiar, is set in a cyberpunk dystopia in the year 2052.
Yeah.
And
it sounds very Matrixy to me, but then again, most sci-fi sounds very Matrixy to me.
Isn't the Matrix just the coming together of all sci-fi into the sci-fi singularity?
Pretty much.
Anyway, I think Deus Ex is a little bit weirder than the Matrix, although it does come from that same kind of conspiracy-minded place.
Yeah.
So you play as Agent Denton, and you're an agent of the UN Anti-Terrorist Coalition. UNATCO, exactly. And you're basically like a nanotech superhero, right? You've got all of these, and you can put more in over the course of the game, these like cybernetic implants that make you like a super special agent. And not in the way that you would just hear in, like your quarterly review. Like, you, sir, are a super special agent, but like literally kind of super powered.
Yes.
And so we're in this dystopian future where, standard dystopia stuff, right? Government is falling apart, corruption, all of that good stuff. But the sort of most pertinent thing to the action of Deus Ex is a pandemic that is sweeping the world, and particularly sweeping North America, called the Grey Death. That is basically a death sentence unless you can get the ambrosia vaccine. However, of course, in something that feels very prescient, although of course the medical system was also troubled in 2000.
Yeah, maybe, probably, a little bit.
It feels prescient to concerns these days. Of course, there's a very limited supply of the vaccine, and it's been decided that it's only going to be given to people who are of like particular benefit to society, which in practice means mostly rich people and government officials, right?
Yeah, as it usually goes. Again,
yes.
Especially in sci-fi, I feel like, especially in like cyberpunk dystopian sci-fi.
Yes. But Deus Ex, and this is where I think it's like, this is insane, right? In Deus Ex, like, you're this special agent, and you find this conspiracy, right, that has to do with this, like, vaccine and this pandemic, right, that brings you into contact and conflict with not only the Triads, not only the Majestic 12, but also the Illuminati.
Of course. You gotta have the Illuminati.
It's just like, can you imagine? This is the way in which it's like, oh yeah, this was 2000. Like, can you imagine somebody making a serious video game in which the Illuminati are like the main antagonists in 2019?
Is the Illuminati not in Assassin's Creed? Is that, I guess it's the Templars and but similar, right?
I mean, it's a similar idea.
I mean, I
just
guess
feel like
they've dropped some of that in modern Assassin's Creed games, but I'm just saying, like, I think the Illuminati is still a viable resource for villainy.
I just feel like they're such a meme.
I mean, yes, fair enough.
That it would be hard to make a game that was meant to be taken seriously where the Illuminati are the antagonists.
Okay.
Yeah. I just think they're just, like, too weird, and too, like, much of a joke. Now that I'm saying this, the Illuminati are going to get me. So...
But, I mean, the whole point of, like, Deus Ex has, like, all the conspiracy theories, right? So it'd be weird if they left the Illuminati out of, all the conspiracy theories out there.
I guess so. But it's just like reading about it starts to just feel like a little ridiculous. It's like we could have just stuck with one secret society. We had to do like 3.
Yeah. They do have the Templars in here too.
Really?
Seems like it, yeah.
Great.
I mean, they just have everything. It says that it's an alternate history where real-world conspiracy theories are true, such as Men in Black and chupacabras, which sounds familiar, but I could not tell you what they are.
Isn't the chupacabra like a mythical monster?
I think so, probably. I mean, that's what it sounds like, at least when you say it out loud.
Anyway, right. So you're a Special Agent Denton, and you're gonna do all of this fun action-adventure craziness, and, like, eventually it's like, you have to, like, go to Area 51, because of course you do, right? Where, and again, spoilers for a 20-year-old game, you, like, have to choose, like, you find out that the Grey Death, this pandemic virus, was actually manufactured by the Illuminati, because of course it was, right? And at the end, you have to choose to decide, like, you kind of defeat the Illuminati, but then you have to decide whether you want to bring them back and then, like, control the world with an invisible hand. Which, like, and you get to choose, and the ending proceeds accordingly.
Yeah, it seems like you end up in the same place, but the path to get there can be significantly different. from what I was seeing about it.
Yeah, so one of the reasons that Deus Ex is considered so groundbreaking, right, is that it really is sort of one of these first games that really gives you the option of how you want to play the game, right? So it's not only, it's a first-person shooter on the face of it, right?
Yes.
But it has a lot of elements that are more traditional of RPGs.
Yes.
Right? So you have the kind of the skill point system, and the ability to make weapons modifications, and you can give yourself up to 9 cybernetic enhancements, which sort of change your character's abilities or make certain things easier. So it's a game that, as USA Today described it in a review, quote, "At the easiest difficulty setting, your character is pureed again and again by an onslaught of human and robotic terrorists until you learn the value of stealth." So while it is a game that sort of encourages you to stealth at least some of it, also, if you level yourself up in the correct way, you can become a kind of a tank that can just sort of pummel through. So it really gives you options as to how you want to play the game, which, with all the think pieces I was reading, it's really one of the first times this happened, and it really cracks open that first-person shooter genre. There were some other games that had started to explore this before, but Deus Ex was a really big sort of step forward on that front, and also, laid the groundwork for the kind of games that are on their faces shooters now, but aren't really, the game isn't just a shooter. So in many ways, I am bitter about the existence of this game, because it foisted upon me a whole generation of games that I would like to play, but am not good at.
I don't think that comes down to this game. The first-person shooter was pretty ubiquitous, even without this one. I feel like it would have existed. They're more interesting first-person shooters now.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. And it's not just this, too. There's System Shock coming out around this time, which obviously then inspired, the BioShock series, which then inspired a whole host of, not copycats, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm just saying, reading about all these games where they showed that first-person shooters could be more. I'm like, how dare you? Couldn't it have been something else?
Don't you know, Madelyn? Some games are just not meant for you.
No!
That's the discourse on Twitter right now, Madelyn.
I know. Let's not get into that. Let's save that for next week's Time Quest.
Look forward to it. But there's also a lot of emphasis on dialogue too. And making choices. But again, it seems at least from the impression of it, I haven't watched a playthrough or anything, but it seems like you end up in the same place. It's just how easy or hard you make it for yourself and the route that you take to get there.
Yeah. It also means, because you can sort of take different routes, that many of the puzzles have to be in some ways at least a little redundant, right? And not in a bad way, just in you have to learn the same things.
Yeah. Right?
Because you can miss large sections of the game world in a single playthrough based on your playstyle.
Yep.
Which, man, as people that are currently thinking about mechanics and how they function with narrative, that's gotta be tricky.
Yeah.
And, the guy at PAX who was talking about
Divinity 2.
Yeah. I feel like designing a game where players can skip large chunks. Man, cool games, people, but why do you do this to yourselves?
I even saw you can kill off some bosses early in the game. Big boss characters.
Yeah. You can kill...
That's crazy to me.
Why did you do this to yourself?
It's not even... it's not, open worldy, right? This does have, a linear progression to the plot. So, I can't imagine, trying to have, a generally linear progression in the plot, but also make it so that these major things can happen and still, make everything work. It's just so over the top for me. It feels so intimidating just to even say it.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. It's also interesting to think of. I'm fascinated now by like the size of different video game teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
And man, like, so much of this, it seemed like the development process for this game was not a happy one. So it starts off in a cool place of like Ion Storm basically giving this team, they're like saying like to this lead designer, like, hey, come make your dream game with us. Like, he just got laid off somewhere else. Come make like exactly the game you want to make.
Yeah.
But he had sort of like two teams within the team. One of which came from a background of like RPG development, and one came from a background of like inventive like sim development.
Yeah.
That did not really agree on the direction the game should go.
I mean, theoretically, that's what the lead designer is for, though, right?
Right.
Like, he should be making he or she should be making those decisions.
Right. But they do just, like, his whole idea was that by bringing these two different teams that they'd be able to make this, like, game that was unlike anything that had been made before. Which, in many ways, they succeeded in doing. But the teams were, like, so hated each other that, like, they eventually sort of had to work 100% separately. And they had to be called Team 1 and Team A.
So that nobody was on top of the other?
Yeah. It couldn't be A and B. It couldn't be 1 and 2.
I can't imagine trying to deal with teams that, like, cannot work, like, entirely separately. Like, how do you even do that? Because at the end, like, everything has to fit together, right? Like, sure, you can have somebody working on the immersive sim elements and somebody working on the RPG elements, but then, like, at the end, when you smush them together, they have to work. And if you haven't had any communication, really, between the two teams, like, how can you know that it will work?
I know. I mean, I agree. I don't know how they did it. I guess they eventually figured out how to make it work together, but it sounds just, like, incredibly unpleasant.
Yeah. I mean, you know, every big studio, like, usually has, like, different studios across, you know, different areas that sometimes focus either on different games or different parts of different games. And I think that, you know, some studios have some rivalry, some not great rivalry between different parts of their company. But even then, like, I feel like they communicate when they're working on the same game. Yeah. It's just so weird to think, like, I can't deal with these people. So I'm just gonna do this part of the game by myself. It's just so bratty.
You know, this might come as a surprise to you, but sometimes people that work on video games are brats.
Sometimes people are brats. That's really all you have to say.
That is true.
We're doing a group project in my Imaginary Worlds class right now, and I am, like, it's very hard to work. We have a group of like 7 people, which is just too many when you're not like when you don't like have a role. You're just like on a team working on a project, right? And nobody has like an assigned role, so nothing gets done because nobody wants to do anything without everybody else weighing in. But 7 people, like, you know, can't agree on anything.
Right.
So I do sympathize to a certain extent with like having difficulties, like across teams and not really knowing what the direction is and then getting mad at people who disagree with you on the direction. So I sort of understand that, but you'd think if it was a professional capacity, it would be a little bit more professional.
Right? It's like you're all still getting paid to be there at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And it was only like a 30-person team. So it's not like, you know, obviously that's a lot bigger than, what did you say, like 7, right?
Yeah.
But still, like, it's not like this is like 100 people who can't agree and they're all sort of being asked to weigh in. It's 30 people.
Speaking of everything.
Good seg,
Thanks.
Emma.
I really put some effort into it.
That was really great.
Uh-huh.
You did a really good job there. Go
Everything.
on, continue.
Everything is a video game where the player explores a procedurally generated universe and is able to control several objects within it. You can shift your control as you go, and shift the scale of the game, and then, do it in a big cycle. And that's what everything is, basically.
Everything is the kind of game that I, just don't quite... It sounds beautiful and really cool.
I mean, I think it's, it's what is it, Tetris Effect, where people are like, it changed my life, or whatever. And I feel like that's one of the games that, you can't just, read a description of it and, understand the experience of playing it. Right?
True. Here's the difference, though. In Tetris Effect, you play Tetris. Right? So there's still, my thing about everything is it sounds beautiful, it sounds really fascinating. I am too competitive to find myself particularly interested in playing it.
Stardew Valley.
Stardew Valley has, goals,
You play Katamari. This reminds me a lot
goals.
of Katamari.
But, your ultimate goal in this game is, it's, to try to, inhabit every object, right?
I think so, yeah.
So, I don't know. Maybe that would feel like enough of a goal for me to feel fulfilled in that way. I just like my video games to have, goals. Even if it's not a final ending, right? Even if there's a lot of different paths. In Stardew Valley, I always have a goal at a given time. Whether it's romancing someone, or getting deeper in the cavern, or, doing a good job and making a lot of money on my crops, or something. Mm-hmm. Right? So even if the game itself is never going to be it's over now, I always have something that I'm working towards for some purpose. And maybe this would feel that way, but whenever I read about games like this, or, it's not at all the same, but, Abzu made me feel, the same way, of there's not enough purpose here, just for my game taste.
I don't know if you've really tried, any of those types of games, though.
That's fair. That is a fair critique.
I remember playing Flower with Dad one evening, and that was, you don't really have a goal in Flower, but it's really good. But that, I didn't know, I thought it would just be oh, you're a flower, and we'd play it for 20 minutes, but we played the whole thing in one sitting. So, I feel like it's like that, where you just have to sit with it and do it. Kotaku describes it, and I'm gonna censor it because we're friendly, but some hippie crap, but good hippie crap. So, it feels sort of like that. And, to understand, real hippie crap, you have to, just do it, in my opinion.
That's fair. That's fair. I'll take that critique. Everything just reminds me, I was reading about it, I was what this game this reminds me of, and what kind of mashup I need to avoid in mashing these two together, is, it's like Spore, if Spore was ooh, psychedelic.
I feel like I didn't connect to Spore because it just had so many, menus? And maybe I'm remembering it wrong.
No, I mean, it's 100% a different game. It's
plus,
mostly just going from different
the threat
sizes.
Of death in Spore, which I feel like when you don't know what's going on, and you can also die, then it becomes, stressful, rather than, relaxing.
No, they are 100% different games, in every way, except that they allow you to traverse different size things.
Uh-huh.
This idea of going from subatomic to, planet size. But it reminded me of that, especially because I was sort of in the think, I was wow, if you took this game and you gave it, more kind of action-y objectives, which might be something that we would try to do based on some things from Deus Ex, it's wow, we have created Spore. Mm-hmm. I do think it's a really cool idea for a game, and that it probably, I bet if I played it, it would scratch that Katamari itch, and I would like it.
That's sort of why it reminds me of Katamari. It's things don't walk, they roll.
That's fair.
So it feels very Katamari-y.
Somebody get this guy to make a new Katamari game.
He makes other games. You can look them up.
I know that. He made Mountain, right? I know he
Oh,
makes
this
other
guy.
games.
I thought you meant the actual Katamari maker.
No, I don't care about what I just want more Katamari. We love Katamari.
That's the title of the game, yeah. But most, you should probably get, I don't know, Clickbait Boyfriend to play it, because apparently it's very philosophical.
So, I asked Clickbait Boyfriend, about the philosopher who is featured in everything, who is a guy called Alan Watts. And this is what he said.
Oh, no.
Here's a direct quote on Alan Watts. He says, he's a spiritual guru kind of guy who I guess at some point was a pretty popular public intellectual figure who did a lot to push Eastern philosophy and integrate it with Western thought. My impression of him is that he liked to spout deep aphorisms and call himself a philosopher. Some people got kind of into philosophy through Alan Watts, though, so he was successful in that way. End quote.
Lovely.
So, not to, hippie crap on Alan Watts, but, it's not the same kind of philosophy that Clickbait Boyfriend does.
Mm-hmm.
But it does sound like, based on that description, what am I trying to say? Like a good fit for this game.
Mm-hmm.
And this sort of hippie crap game, to have some hippie crap philosophy associated with it, that's good. Feels soothing.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want stuff that Josh reads to be associated with this. That would be stressful. I've got to give it a shout out, though, for winning Most Innovative at the Games for Change Festival.
Yeah.
Not really sure I 100% understand how this can be feasibly called a game for change.
Well, it's one of those,
Like environmental?
Yeah, like environmental. It's just an empathy game, I would say.
To give me empathy for
everything.
What? Quarks?
For everything.
Planets? For the game Everything?
It was also an 11-minute trailer for Everything, featuring Alan Watts, was also put on the long list for the Academy Award for Best Animated Short Film.
Really?
The first video game trailer to qualify.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, that must be the only reason you make an 11-minute trailer, though, right? Just to qualify for that?
They apparently submitted it to some film festivals, hence why it was available for the Oscars.
Right.
So it won the jury prize at the Vienna Independent Shorts Film Festival, for instance.
Well, okay. Man, again, in the spirit of why would you do this to yourself? You're already making a video game, right? That's hard.
Yeah.
Why on earth would you also be like, you know what else I want to do? The film festival circuit. That'll be easy.
I guess doing the circuit sure would be hard. I don't know how hard, I haven't watched the 11-minute trailer, so I don't know if it's just I'm going to play this for 11 minutes, and Alan Watts is going to read the quotes we put in, and there you go. Because I feel like if it's working properly, it should work. Right? Just to play it straight and get a good 11-minute clip that you can do in a film festival.
That's true.
The acts of submitting it and everything is probably more difficult. Well, not more difficult, but more of a hassle. How about that?
That is true. I feel like knowing how hard it is to make a video game, it's why would you choose to do anything else during that time?
It's true.
If you don't have to.
He actually taught himself Unity in order to make this.
I know.
I mean, anybody, you can teach yourself Unity, but it's weird to think of making an incredibly successful game whilst teaching yourself Unity, rather than making a bunch of crap first.
Well, you can do it too,
One day. I'll probably, focus in on the making cheap little clones first to understand how Unity works.
Make me a mod Katamari.
No.
Please?
Nope.
Please?
Nope.
Fine. Put some philosophy quotes in it, though.
Okay, I will.
Then Clickbait Boyfriend can review it.
Sounds good.
Perfect. I don't know. I'm like, now that I've been like whining about how I don't feel like this is my kind of game, like, I don't know. I feel like I probably have to try it. Man, how can someone who is just learning Unity figure out how to make a procedurally generated universe? That feels like it would have to be hard.
I mean, you know, there were 2 other people working with him. So he had somebody who had previously helped him assisted with programming. So he probably did the more technical parts. But you can use Unity even without really knowing programming. So he could set some stuff up, and then the more technical parts this other guy could probably work on.
Sure.
And also, like I
shocked
said,
and
like
bemused.
they didn't want to do a walk cycle for anything, so they roll. That was basically the design philosophy behind that.
I always love those kinds of stories. They're like, here's this iconic part of a video game. Like, what? There's a good story. Actually, there's a good story about that from, not a good story, kind of a dark story about that from Deus Ex, too. So, Deus Ex is released in the year 2000, and some of it takes place in New York, right? Like the headquarters for UNATCO, whatever it is. No, that was right. I said that thinking for sure it was wrong, but it was absolutely right for the first time in my life.
Wow.
Is on like Liberty Island, right? Like the Statue of Liberty, on what they call in the game Liberty Island. And so like you do spend some time in this dystopian New York, and in this dystopian New York, if you look, like the Twin Towers aren't there, made in the year 2000, and the real reason for that is just like it's memory, right? Like they didn't have the memory for it, so they didn't program them in. But the in-game reason is that they were destroyed in a terrorist attack, which is kind of dark.
Yeah.
And Illuminati. Anyway, I thought that was an interesting bit of trivia.
Yeah.
But also, I just enjoy stories like that where it's like, wow, like what a cool and integral part of the game. And they're like, yeah, we did that because like Billy had a cold on Tuesday and nobody knew how to.
I don't think I've ever heard one that was Billy had a cold on Tuesday, but I get what you're getting at.
It's like Billy accidentally got some gum in his laptop, and so we completely lost the files. So we just decided they weren't going to have faces. It's never quite like that.
Yeah.
I wish it was. I would relish a story like that. But I do enjoy those kind of like behind the scenes, like why do they roll? Well, we didn't really know how to make them walk.
Yeah. A totally unrelated fun fact that I learned recently, and before we transition into our mashup, but likely the reason that Square Enix has been releasing all these remasters of their Final Fantasy games for the Switch, but likely the reason they didn't do one for Final Fantasy VIII is because they lost the files for it.
How do you do that?
Apparently, like, development of 8 and 9 was happening at the same time, so 8's development was kind of, like, disorganized, and they just disorganized the files away.
How is that possible?
Kingdom Hearts 1, too. Apparently they had lost a lot of the original files, and they had to remake them for the PS3.
I just don't understand. These are multi-million-dollar games. You don't have, like, a external hard drive somewhere? Like...
That they probably do. They just don't know where the external hard drive is. And that's why game preservation is important, people.
Because you cannot trust these people.
Nope. I'm not saying commit crimes, but maybe you should commit crimes, game developers.
That was on Twitter this week, too, wasn't it?
Yeah. Anyway, how are we mashing these things up?
Well, it's called Spore.
Nope.
No, I'm just kidding. It's like Spore with conspiracies.
Spore with conspiracies. So you start as a baby conspiracy and then try to grow your way up into a big old conspiracy?
That is actually interesting. That would be kind of an interesting, really bizarre way to mash these two up. Yeah.
How would that work? Would that be sort of like Like one of those, like, plague games where you have to, like,
it
spread
would
it.
have to be kind of like Pandemic, I think. I don't know. I mean, that's, like, definitely an interesting idea. And you know what? That's the kind of game that would get some press in 2019. So we should make it, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Everyone can roll.
Sure, of course. Everybody can roll.
It should be your first crappy Unity game, Emma.
The conspiracy? Just make a Pandemic reskin, basically?
Yes. No, it's like Katamari.
So you have to roll up people into your conspiracy.
Yeah.
Dark.
And then you gain new abilities based on the people you eat.
I'm sorry, we're eating people now?
Well, you know, the Katamari kind of absorbs them eventually, right?
I don't think it really eats them, though. They just turn into a star, so they just probably incinerate, you know?
Yes, that's better.
I don't know. Would you rather be eaten or, like, instantaneously incinerated?
Is it instantaneous?
I don't know. Is incineration instantaneous? He just sort of snaps and points, and then it turns into a planet, right?
They have to, like, spin up for, he throws it into the...
Oh, that's true. You probably would have died from, like, the centrifugal force or whatever. Centripetal force. I haven't taken physics in a while. Whatever kind of force it is.
We're way off track here.
Well, I don't know how you do a Katamari type conspiracy thing.
I would still play it. It's like you have to gather, like, words.
Gather words?
You're, like, rolling up thoughts and words.
So you, like, roll up the non-relevant thoughts so that only everybody is thinking about the conspiracy theories.
Yes. And you, like, roll in people's brains.
Alternatively,
to get it, like,
you're a special agent investigating the prince. But then...
We're not mashing up Katamari.
I know.
Okay. So, there's gotta be some, like, hippy-dippy philosophy. There's gotta be something incorporating moving from different... My boyfriend gives that a thumbs up. Something moving from incorporating, like, different levels of being.
Mm-hmm.
There's gotta be some conspiracies.
Mm-hmm.
And there's gotta be, like, some choose how you want to play action-adventure.
Yeah.
So you're a special agent who has the ability to size shift all the way down from planetary size to the subatomic level.
So you're Ant-Man.
And it's your responsibility to crawl up the Innosis.
Stop it! We're a family-friendly podcast, Madelyn, please.
No, you're like Ant-Man, but, like, super-powered.
So Ant-Man?
I'm sorry, but, like, supercharged.
Okay.
Ant-Man can't get bigger.
Yeah, I can.
I mean, to human size, not to, like...
No, you can get big.
What?
He can get big.
Since when? His name is Ant-Man.
But he's always been able to get big.
I have no memory of that from the first movie.
You know, I don't know if he does it in the first movie, but he does it in Civil War. And I think in the second movie.
Well, some of us can't afford the $10,000 to catch up on Marvel movies, Emma.
Well, you can go to, you can see Endgame early by sitting through every single
one.
Marvel movie for
By
over
2 hours.
60 hours.
Good, it's 2 hours early.
Oh, well that makes it worth it.
It does.
The funny thing is, like, you're seeing it 2 hours early, but people are going into the normal screening and you've still got an hour left of that movie.
Yeah.
So are you really seeing it early? Who knows? Okay, I got it. You're Ant-Man. We're making an Ant-Man game.
No.
Because that's what the people want.
It's like, no.
Iron Man VR? Who cares? We want Ant-Man role-playing game.
No, I meant, like, so you can, like, shrink so you can, like, be a cell in someone's brain, right? And, like, plant conspiracies that way.
Ooh.
And then you could grow up to be like a human size and like do like conspiracy theorist BS, and you can grow to be huge.
What's the conspiracy theorist BS? What does that entail?
I don't know.
What's the step by step?
Going on InfoWars.
Oh no.
And then you can get huge to step on people who don't agree with you.
So it's political commentary, is what you're saying.
Yes.
So we're leaning into politics in video games.
Apparently.
We're like, not only are there politics in this video game, it's only politics.
Pretty much. There's you can fight people too if you want.
You can fight people too. You
have different choices of how you want to play.
I mean, it's like physical fighting, but is it like symbolic, or are you actually like punching people?
You can choose.
You can choose. No, like, yeah, I understand that's like a different form of gameplay, but like these two would be like the same thing mechanically, right? You'd be fighting, but is it like symbolic fighting that's represented through physical fighting, or are you actually beating people up?
Oh, that's interesting.
That's what I was asking.
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure. I haven't quite settled on the tone of the game yet.
Okay.
We'll work that one out in QA.
Okay. We want to have some sort of fighting. Don't worry, publishers. There will be fighting. People will want to play it.
It's not just talking.
You can punch some folk. That's what we want in our video games.
Yes. Punching.
It's true.
I think that there's an interesting game in here, and I just can't quite excavate it.
No, I think it's I've been joking, but it actually is kind of a metaphor for our United States political discourse. Planting little things in people's head as society normalizes things.
Okay, so like the brain levels, the levels where you're like inside the brain are stealth levels. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can like fight your way through if you've tanked yourself up. But like they're sort of more designed to stealth through and like plant the seed and then stealth out.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's turning into Persona, but that's okay.
Yeah, it's like evil Persona.
It's like in reverse. That's okay though. And then like when you're in like the human level, it's more like you do like symbolic fights to like convince people.
Uh-huh.
So or you can do literal physical fights. It depends on how we decide to go.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's the climax, that eventually you're like fighting for real and your character actually isn't a good fighter.
Yeah, that would be funny.
Right? It's like been Mortal Kombat, like.
Actually,
style.
that would be a really awesome example of using mechanics as narrative.
Right.
Like in any context, you've been doing like this symbolic fighting, and then suddenly you're in a real fight, and none of your things work.
Yeah. And then I have to figure out, because I don't quite know what this is, like, can you take control of, like, eventually, like, entire countries? Like, once you've done enough at the atomic and the human level, can you eventually, like, control a macro level of, like, country?
So maybe it's sort of like Pandemic in that way, in that, like, you're gradually building up your level of influence, and how many people you can affect with things.
Yes.
And you can have the good route or the bad route.
Or the middle route.
Or the middle route, where you're just like, hey man, what if we did the same thing as always? And everybody's
the middle
like,
route is
I
you
guess
become
that's
philosopher
fine.
Alan Watts. Well, I think this would be an interesting game.
Yeah, so it needs some tweaking, but we've got a solid concept, I think. Have to do a little research, think a little bit about the messaging, incorporate some, different routes, and...
We can fall back on word Katamari if we must.
Yes. Imagine going into, a pitch or something. Like, we've got this big idea, or we can make a Katamari skin where you roll up words. Which one do you like? They're really similar, but...
Maybe that's the macro level, is you just eventually, like, you're rolling a conspiracy Katamari.
Sure, that can be it.
It's like a bonus. It's like DLC. It's bonus DLC.
Uh-huh.
You get the concept art in the collector's edition.
Yes.
Anyway, folks, thanks for tuning in for this week's episode of Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
If you liked this week's episode, why don't you go ahead and subscribe to the show? We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, anywhere podcasts can be found. Basically, you can find us for download. So subscribe so you never miss an episode on Sundays at noon. And also, if you're feeling particularly nice or bored or what have you, leave us a rating and a review. It really makes our day. If you like the show and you want more than just a one weekly podcast, you should also check out our website, www.talkthispodcast.com. We're finally really getting the blog up and running again in these next couple of weeks after sort of a slow period over the past month. So it's a good time to head back, catch up, get back in the swing of things. Read longtime series, Clickbait Boyfriend, which I think is coming back this week, and Split Screen. As well as read more about the show and the games in the hat that we're about to talk about and all that good stuff. You can also follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Talk This Podcast, and YouTube at Talk This Sisters, where you can watch Emma's series on gameplay as storytelling, Play This, as well as various other fun video content. So I think that's the spiel on all things Talk This. Emma, are you ready to pull some games for the hat for
I am.
2 weeks from now? See if I can talk?
Yep, I'm ready. So,
All right.
our old game shall be BioShock.
Oh, okay. Have we not already done BioShock?
I don't think so.
I'm sure we haven't. I was thinking, didn't we just do BioShock? But we absolutely didn't.
No, we just talked about it a little bit in this episode.
Right.
And I think we talked about it when we were talking about our paper.
Right.
But I don't think we've done the episode. But we can go back and check.
We haven't. I'm sure
Yeah.
we haven't. What's the new game? The
new game is Unravel 2.
Ooh, a knitting game. Nice.
Yes, it's about knitting.
Well, won't that make a fun mashup?
Yeah. So that's what we'll be doing 2 weeks from now. Next week will be a side quest, where we'll talk about some discourse that will probably be 3 weeks old. But we never said we were hip.
We're not a daily podcast.
Yeah.
Follow Emma on Twitter if you want thoughts on daily discourse.
Yes, I tweet sometimes. Anyway, we hope that your day is, not full of, conspiracies. Your week.